Hello, Andrés. Welcome.
Thank you.
Welcome
Hi.
to this first Congress of Cosmos-Theologia.
Hi, all.
It's a pleasure to have you here and to share this moment with you.
It's my pleasure to be here also, and I'm very looking forward to answering any questions or contributing.
Great. Thank you very much. I'm sure it's going to be really interesting and really deep also.
I'll do the best I can. I don't know if it's going to be deep or shallow, but I'll do the best I can.
Yeah. Oh, but thank you very much for that.
Yes.
I would like to, if you want to, how to say, introduce, I said in Spanish, but if you like to introduce the theme that you are going to talk today, and then we can follow.
Sure. So I will be talking about the universal laws as have been pointed out in the Bhagavad Gita. And the universal laws, which I would like to share, are universally applicable. So it is something that we can all practically use in our day-to-day lives, in our family, with our children, not only for the sake of managing situational positions in life, but also for the sake of discovering what is the nature of this individual. So that basically comes to two parts. Number one, how to manage our life effectively. Some pointers, because I cannot say everything. The Bhagavad Gita is a huge text. And number two is about the nature of this individual, I, the self. So these are the two topics that the Bhagavad Gita talks about. So I would attempt to do the best I can in this short period of time. And please understand that the Bhagavad Gita is a huge text. So it's very hard to put it all into one short 1.5 or whatever time we have together.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much. Sounds really, really good. And for to know specifically, because probably there's people that don't know about Bhagavad Gita. So what is Bhagavad Gita? And also another question that is involved with that is why you are interested in it. So what you can say about it?
Sure. So the question is, what is the Bhagavad Gita and why specifically am I teaching it? The why am I teaching it will be perhaps clear if I answer what is the Bhagavad Gita. So to understand this text, firstly, I would like to ask all of us the common question: what is everyone seeking? Just think about that for a moment. What are you seeking? You don't have to answer it directly, but just think about it. We're all seeking freedom from a sense of smallness, a sense of limitation. We're seeking a sense of permanent fulfillment, not temporary fulfillment. One day I'm happy, next day I'm unhappy, but we're seeking that sense of fulfillment that is consistent, non-wavering. It doesn't change. It doesn't depend on the situations in the world. So this means that the Gita helps us to discover this very question, to actually address this question: what is it that we're all seeking, and how to actually discover that within ourselves? So the question is now, where specifically is this answer found, right? So the question is, what are we all seeking? And the answer is a freedom from smallness. I feel small, unworthy, inadequate, not good enough, a small person in this huge, vast universe, right? What is my purpose? What is my goal? Where is all of this going? For what? For why? Then what? Then what? Then what? So this question is something that is inherent in every single human being. And now the next question is, where specifically do we find this answer? And it is inside what we call the Vedas. The Vedas in Indian philosophy is a book of knowledge. That's what Vedas mean, just a huge book of knowledge. And this book of knowledge consists of two sections. The first is Karma Kanda, and the second is Upanishads. The Karma Kanda, section 1 of the Vedas, consists of rituals. So this basically involves how to attain more and better in this world. But since the topic is about the Bhagavad Gita, I want to specifically focus on this second section called the Upanishads, and I will connect the Upanishads to the Bhagavad Gita. So you first have to understand what are the Upanishads before we can understand what is the Bhagavad Gita. Okay, so let's ask, what is the purpose of the Upanishads text? That means the second section of the Vedas. There are three purposes. The first purpose is to discard old notions. So this means we all have certain notions about the world, how the world is, what the world is not, but also notions about this person. What is this person and what is this person not? And so we carry these notions. They could be right, but they could also be incorrect. They could be distorted. So the first purpose of the Gita is to discard these false notions about this person and about this world, which are causing misalignment or disharmony with the world. The second purpose of the Upanishads is to permanently disintegrate them. So it's one thing to discard them, but what about tomorrow? It's like cleaning the room, sweeping the room of dust, right? Or blowing, and then tomorrow the dust falls again. So that's not good enough. So the second part or the purpose of the Upanishad is to permanently disintegrate these notions so they do not come back. And the third purpose of the Upanishads is to gain or to discover this permanent contentment within oneself. So now the question is, how is this done, right? So that's three purposes of the Upanishads. How exactly is this done? Well, the word Upanishads actually within itself is the answer. So the Upanishads has basically two syllables, upa, ni, and shad. So what does this upa mean? Upa means that which is near, so it's near to you. But if you think about the word near, it's a relative word, isn't it? For example, the person that is in your room right now, that person is near. But relative to what? Relative to you. That object over there in the distance, if you look right now, is near. Relative to what? Relative to some other object that is much further. So now the question is, what is the nearest of the nearest, which has no nearer? Ask yourself this. What is the nearest of the nearest? And you cannot be nearer to that. Is it your house? Your spouse? Your wealth? Because wealth is near relative to what? To your memory. If you don't have memory of your wealth, then you cannot say wealth at all. So wealth is nearer to memory, but what is even nearer to your memory? You are. So what is the nearest of the nearest? Myself, I. Now the second is upa ni. Ni says that there is a possibility that even though this myself is the nearest of the nearest, there is a possibility that I have a mistaken notion. What is the nature of this self, of this I? So when a person says I, sure, what does this I mean? Do we even know? Do we even understand the nature of this I? So the ni is there to remind us that there may be a possibility of misrepresenting what is the true nature of this I. And finally, shad, upanishad, that means sit down. In other words, in order to discover what is the nature of that which is nearest of all, there is nothing nearer than that. I have to what? Sit down. I have to sit down and investigate and reflect into the nature of this self. So now let's go back to the question. The original question was, what is the Bhagavad Gita, right? Okay. So the answer is the Gita is a conversation. It's a story. It doesn't come from the Vedas. It comes from the Mahabharata, which I will get to soon. It's a conversation between Arjuna and Krishna. And Krishna teaches Arjuna the nature of I, the nature of self, and the universal laws and orders that govern this universe, that govern your heart right now, that govern your brain cells, that are causing you to listen, to pay attention right now. The laws and orders that are universal in the past, present, and the future, that are always true. Krishna expounds exactly what the Upanishads are saying, which comes from the Vedas, the second section, but in a conversational format. So it's just like you and I. For example, I'm the teacher, you're the student, or you're the student and I'm the teacher. And we're having a conversation like that. So the whole Gita is just a conversation between the student and a very, very wise, liberated teacher called Krishna. And this is why every chapter in the Bhagavad Gita, it says, Om Tat Sat iti Srimad Bhagavad Gita tsu Upanishatsu. In other words, the nature of the knowledge within the Bhagavad Gita is exactly the same knowledge as contained in the Upanishads. So this Bhagavad Gita now has two topics. Remember, we're still on the question is, what is Bhagavad Gita? It's a long answer, right? So pay attention. So it has two topics. The first topic of the Bhagavad Gita is Brahma Vidya. That's why it says, Iti Srimad Bhagavad Gita tsu Upanishatsu Brahma Vidyayam Yoga Shastre. So Brahma Vidya is revealing the nature of the self, of you, of I. When a person says I am, what is the nature of that I? That is contained in the knowledge called Brahma Vidya. The second topic of the Bhagavad Gita is called Yoga Shastra. So Brahma Vidya, Yoga Shastra. And what is Yoga Shastra about? It shows you how to gain a proper understanding, how to qualify this mind that is listening right now for Brahma Vidya knowledge, for the highest knowledge, so that you may understand firmly, clearly, the nature of the entire universe, the reality itself, including what is your connection, your relation to the entire universe. Just like any piece of knowledge, mathematics or physics, you need a prerequisite, a preamble. You need to prepare the mind in order to accept the big vision, the big teaching. So Yoga Shastra, what is Yoga Shastra? That knowledge which prepares the mind for Brahma Vidya, the highest knowledge, which is the nature of the self and the entire universe. And this is why Yoga Shastra has become, in the Bhagavad Gita, or has made the Bhagavad Gita one of the most popular philosophical Indian texts in India, because Yoga Shastra is not just about qualifying the mind for Brahma Vidya, but it just happens to contain all of the solutions that can be applied in the past, present, and future for the sake of dealing with our day-to-day, ordinary lives, with wife, with our boss, with our children, with ourselves, dealing with our emotions, how to think, right? How to negotiate. All of this happens to be within the Yoga Shastra, which is why it is highly popular today, the Bhagavad Gita, for this reason alone. Not everyone is interested in Brahma Vidya. That's okay. But for Yoga Shastra, you and I, there is not one person that cannot benefit from that. So by me sharing a little bit more about the Bhagavad Gita, then we can see what Yoga Shastra is, because it's not just a one-line answer. Okay, so I'm still answering the question, what is the Bhagavad Gita, right? Okay, so I said earlier that the Bhagavad Gita comes from the story called Mahabharata, which is one of the largest epics written in the world. Now, let me just give you a quick story of the Mahabharata in case you haven't heard, because it is quite an interesting story. And then in this story, I will share some pointers to answer what is the Bhagavad Gita, both Brahma Vidya and also Yoga Shastra about, because we learn through stories. So let's listen to a story and we'll see if we can learn a few things. So how does the Mahabharata story, one of the largest epics, start? There's a kingdom called Hastinapur. And in this Hastinapur kingdom, there is a king. And he has two sons. One of them is Dhritarashtra and the other is Pandu. Now, normally, the elder son is the king, right? However, Dhritarashtra was born blind. So therefore, Pandu became the king. Now, do you think that Dhritarashtra, the elder blind son, was happy? Absolutely not. So over time, Dhritarashtra became resentful. He became angry. He said, why is life treating me like this? Why was I born blind? You know, why me? What did I do wrong? So we all go through situations like this. We sometimes ask, you know, why am I receiving this right now? It's inappropriate. But there's always a connection, cause and effect relationship, which I'll talk about later. So over time, Dhritarashtra grew angry, resentful. And Pandu, the younger son who became the king, he noticed this. He noticed that because he's it's like you sensitive to your brother or to your sister, and so he nourished his brother once in a while. And how did he do this? Every once in a while, Pandu went to the forest, and he gave temporary kingship to his son. So that means to his brother Dhritarashtra. So it means Dhritarashtra could, for a moment, for a few days, rule Hastinapur kingdom, and Pandu would just get a little bit of a break in the forest. Now, one day, when Pandu was in the forest and Dhritarashtra was ruling in his place, he was taking his place, Pandu went to the forest into some bushes, and he heard some noise in the background, and he thought it was a deer. He was absolutely sure it was a deer. Or do we really know, right? So let's see. So what happened is he assumed that it was a deer. So that means first thing he interpreted, it's a deer. And immediately he drew his bow and arrow, he released it, and it fired. And he heard a human scream, both a man and a woman. Imagine that. Imagine thinking it's a deer, and then you release the arrow, and then a man and a woman scream. Mortified, he ran over, and he realized he just shot and killed a woman, a wife, and a sage was barely alive. So the sage's wife was dead, and then the sage was alive just a few more breaths just to say this. And he said, you cannot just know, whether unknowingly or knowingly, do something, make a mistake, and then get away with it. Whether you knew that we were here or didn't know that we were here, it's still a mistake. It is your negligence. What is negligence? Assumption. In other words, I see something and I just assume that's how it is. And then I just act according to my previous memory. Oh, it's a deer. It sounds similar to a deer. Shoot. And this is called negligence. So we all go through processes of negligence when we don't take enough time to look or inquire into the nature of something. We just make an assumption. So the sage said, you cannot just get away with this, right? There's consequences for everything, whether you knew about it or not. So Pandu cannot just say, oh, I'm sorry, I didn't know, please don't punish me. No, the universe doesn't work like that. Even if you didn't know, there are still consequences called cause and effect. I will talk about this a little bit later. So the sage said, because you have killed my wife and you have also shot me, next time you try to get passionate with your two wives, so Pandu had two wives, Kunti and Madri, you will die. So this is, imagine that you have two beautiful wives, right? And you try to get passionate with them, and then you die on the spot. So that is quite a punishment right there. So one day, I think Kunti was away. She was probably cooking something. They were still in the forest, right? And Madri was bathing in a waterfall, and Pandu was in a distance watching this beautiful wife, and he just couldn't hold himself back. So he just started coming closer and closer to her, and she said no. She kept pushing him away because she knew that if he tries to get intimate with her, he will die. And he dropped dead basically because he just couldn't hold himself back. So Madri felt so guilty because she was also responsible. Obviously, she could have just not pursued the advances. That she just went to the forest. She just retired and became a recluse, like an ascetic. So basically, now the second wife, Kunti, was a widow. And Kunti became now also the only mother of the 5 sons. So I think that Kunti had 3 sons and Pandu and Madri had 2 sons. So it's the other way around, one of those. So now Kunti was a widow, and she was the only mother of the 5 sons that were amongst that were Pandus. And the names of these sons were Yudhishthira, Bhima, Arjuna, I'm just repeating so you remember, Sahadev, Nakul. Okay, so that's 5 sons, and they're called Pandu. So all these 5 sons, who are Pandu's sons, between Kunti and Madri, they're called Pandavas. Okay. So now the next question is, who becomes the king, right? Because Pandu is dead and Dhritarashtra is blind and he cannot rule the kingdom while blind. So technically, Pandu's eldest son, which is Yudhishthira, should be king, technically. But Dhritarashtra's eldest son, called Duryodhana, sorry for so many names, it is a huge epic, so I'm just simplifying this for you, right? The eldest son of Dhritarashtra is called Duryodhana. And so Duryodhana said, no, I don't think that Yudhishthira should be king because I am the eldest son of my blind father, Dhritarashtra, but I'm not blind. Therefore, I should be king. So what was the solution? The solution was the court said, the Hastinapur court said, between the two, Duryodhana and Yudhishthira, the eldest should be king. Therefore, Yudhishthira should be king. However, Duryodhana again disagreed. He didn't like the solution. So how did they manage this then? So then what Dhritarashtra, remember Dhritarashtra is the father of Duryodhana. Dhritarashtra decided to divide the Hastinapur kingdom into two. However, he did it unfairly because Dhritarashtra was highly attached to his son Duryodhana. So obviously he gave the bigger chunk to Duryodhana and a small, uninhabitable, barren desert to the 5 Pandava brothers. And this place, which they got, was called Indraprastha. Indraprastha. So Duryodhana got a huge chunk of land, right? Pristine and green and beautiful. And the 5 Pandavas got a very, almost like a Sahara desert, right? There's nothing there. So then the Pandavas, when they didn't really, they kind of accepted it because they knew that they couldn't negotiate any further. So what they decided to do is they took the land, right? And Kunti was also there. Their mother was also there. And the Pandavas decided to work really, really, really hard. And through the course of time, they transformed this barren desert called Indraprastha into a thriving, prosperous, green, luscious, beautiful, happy city. Now, do you think that Duryodhana was happy when he saw this? Absolutely not. Duryodhana became jealous. He was like, wait a minute. You guys are so successful. So he didn't have any of this. Then what happened? Now, Duryodhana said, what should I do now? So he decided to kill them. That's easy, right? Just solve the problem right there. Plot to kill them. And he tried to do this in 2 ways. The first was he invited the 5 Pandavas to a wax house. So just imagine a house made out of wax, candle wax. It's highly flammable, right? So his idea was when the 5 Pandavas walk inside the house, he would just put the house on fire and he would just burn them all alive. However, the Pandavas heard about this secretly and they didn't tell Duryodhana that they knew. So they built a tunnel. It's like a Bollywood movie, right? So they built a tunnel underneath the house so they could escape. So when the house was lit on fire, the Pandavas escaped. Now Duryodhana realized this and he wasn't happy. It's like, oh, my plan failed. So what was the second plan of Duryodhana? The plot to kill the 5 Pandavas. So here's what he decided. He said, he called Yudhishthira to a game of dice. And he said, and Yudhishthira, there was a rule back then. It said that if a king, because remember, Yudhishthira is now a king of Indraprastha, the successful city built by the 5 brothers. Who's the eldest? Yudhishthira. Therefore, Yudhishthira is the king of the Indraprastha. So Yudhishthira, there was a rule. If a king is invited for a game of dice, he cannot refuse. Right? So Yudhishthira was a little bit rigid here, because now the question is, according to whom can you not refuse, right? Because already, remember, Yudhishthira knew that Duryodhana tried to kill all 5 of them. And yet again, he is now so blindly inviting himself to a game of dice without even saying anything about the incidents of the previous house. So Yudhishthira just tried to keep it quiet. He didn't want to rock the boat, right? So this is what we do sometimes in life. We just don't say anything. We hope things will get better. And then we just keep on giving more and more permission, license to Duryodhana to keep on doing more irrational things, thinking that we will reform them, but they do not reform. They just give them one more permission to do it again. So this was Yudhishthira's big thing that he didn't see. So anyway, so Yudhishthira goes to the palace, and what does Duryodhana say? Oh, I'm not going to play. I'm going to have my uncle Shakuni play. Now, Shakuni was a master player at cheating the dice, so he could change the dice to his favor. And Yudhishthira, again, didn't say anything. He was like, okay. So in other words, Yudhishthira just kept on saying, okay, 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 okay. So this was Yudhishthira's big problem. So little by little, they started to lose. Right? So Yudhishthira lost his army, lost his cows, lost his money, lost his entire Indraprastha to Duryodhana. Because remember now, Shakuni was playing on the behalf of Duryodhana. But the original plan was Duryodhana will play. Now Duryodhana says, no, you haven't lost anything. You haven't lost everything yet. You still have your 4 brothers. So what happened then? Yudhishthira started staking his brothers one by one. They were all lost to Duryodhana. I've got nothing left. No, you still have yourself. And then Yudhishthira even loses himself to Duryodhana. I've got nothing left. No, you still have your wife. So the 5 Pandavas had one wife, and they were shared. She was shared among the 5 brothers. Don't ask me how is that possible. It's just story, right? And Draupadi was, she was kind of like combing her hair, and she didn't know what was happening. But she was, just combing her hair and putting some makeup on to introduce herself first time to the royal family in Hastinapur Palace. And Duryodhana told his brother Dushasan to go and get Draupadi. So Dushasan goes and tells Draupadi, come over, you've been staked over by Yudhishthira. And Draupadi was, she was a strong woman. She didn't kind of just say yes. So Dushasana had pulled her by the hair into the court. And this was very embarrassing. And then Duryodhana said, I want Draupadi disrobed. So literally, she was wearing a sari, and it's like an Indian sari, beautiful, colorful. And Duryodhana wanted her disrobed completely. And just before Dushasana started to disrobe, Dushasana is a brother of Duryodhana. Before Dushasana started to disrobe Draupadi, she kind of, distanced herself and she pleaded to the royal court. Because remember, Dhritarashtra was listening. And there were all these wise people. There was Bhishma, there was Drona, there was Vidur. All these wise people were in the court sitting, watching the whole scene taking place. And Draupadi, being a very intelligent woman, she said, how can you wise men just sit here and let all of this happen without saying anything? Fair question, right? They were not saying anything. And now the question is, why didn't they do anything? Why didn't they stop Yudhishthira from losing everything? Because it's just crazy to lose all of that, to lose brothers. Why did no one act? So all of them, supposedly wise, right, in the court, they had a different interpretation about what was happening. And what was that interpretation? They thought, well, since it was Yudhishthira who was playing all along, and he had his free will to say no, he didn't exercise it. And so now Yudhishthira has to pay for his consequences. So this is how they looked at it. And they thought their vision was complete. So they didn't say anything, right? So just in their non-saying implied that, no, we're not going to do anything because our interpretation is our interpretation. So then Draupadi had one more chance. She was very intelligent. She said, okay, who did Yudhishthira lose first? Was it himself or was it me? Because if Yudhishthira lost himself first, then he has no right to stake me because he lost himself. And this was true. It's a good argument. And indeed, Yudhishthira lost himself first, but nobody listened. So again, this means that everyone who was there, supposedly wise, had some kind of a distorted perception about what was going on. Now, what was Draupadi's last choice, last resort? She finally prayed to Lord Krishna. And Lord Krishna, this is just a story, don't think now who is Lord Krishna and how can the Lord appear. Just look at it metaphorically. So Lord Krishna appeared and he did not hesitate for 1 second to help Draupadi. Now, who is Lord Krishna? Just look at Lord Krishna as the Lord of the universe, the one that has that total clarity about what should be done and what is correct and what is incorrect, what is just and what is unjust, what is moral and what is immoral. So he had no trouble hesitating. So what did Lord Krishna do? He immediately helped Draupadi. Why? Because Lord Krishna knew that the situation, first of all, had two aspects which the wise men in the court missed. The first aspect was the whole basis of this game was cheating. In fact, Shakuni was a master dice manipulator. That was cheating. And secondly, Duryodhana was supposed to play and not Shakuni. And yet Yudhishthira was accepted that. But even if it's not that particular aspect, the whole thing was cheating because Shakuni literally manipulated the dice every time he rolled it. And the second is, ask yourself this question: how can all men in this court honestly let an innocent woman be abused like this? Can you honestly sit here and not feel something about that? So Krishna knew this with absolute clarity because he's the Lord of the universe. So what happened is he used an intelligent way to kind of help Draupadi. So as Dushasana started to pull Draupadi's sari, then Krishna provided more and more material. So no matter how much Dushasana kept pulling, he just couldn't pull off all of it from Draupadi. Eventually, Dushasana fell exhausted to the ground, and Draupadi was saved. So now the next question is, what happened next, right? So after the Pandavas lost, and obviously Draupadi also was now staked, the new deal was that all of them will go to the forest for 12 years. And in 13th year, they must be in incognito. It means that if you're found in the 13th year, then you must go another 12 years exile in the forest. So on the 13th year, after they've gone there 12 years successfully in the forest, on the 13th year, the 5 Pandavas and Draupadi, their wife, they took residence at a nearby neighboring kingdom close to Hastinapur. And Yudhishthira was a consultant for the king of that residence. Arjuna was a music and dance teacher. Bhima, he was a big person, so he was a cook because he likes to eat very often. And Sahadev and Nakul were just taking care of the horses and the cows in the region. Now remember, Duryodhana was desperately trying to find them in the 13th year because he knew that if he doesn't find them, then the Pandavas will get back their Indraprastha, right? And Duryodhana doesn't want that. So Duryodhana was desperately trying to find them. Now someone said, hey, Duryodhana, there are these 5 exceptional men, because Pandavas are exceptional men, in this kingdom, right? A neighboring kingdom. And Duryodhana said, it must be the Pandavas. Let's go. Now the problem was Duryodhana couldn't just kind of enter the kingdom because they weren't really friendly. The Hastinapur and the neighboring kingdom, they weren't really friendly. So Duryodhana decided to conquer the neighboring kingdom. Now the kingdom discovered this. They found out what Duryodhana wants to conquer with his big army. However, the Pandavas felt obliged because they were very loyal to the king who's been protecting them for all of this, for the 13th year, hiding them away. So they said, no, don't worry about it. You'll be safe. We, the 5 of us, will protect your army, your kingdom. Now, on the battlefield, Duryodhana immediately notices them. And he says, I spotted you. You're found. So now the question is, did Duryodhana spot them in the 13th year? The answer is no, because he spotted them 1 day later after the 13 years was over. So, but Duryodhana didn't agree. He said, no, I spotted them within the 13th year. They should go back to the forest no matter what. So, I just want to pause here. What's the moral so far? So far, why are Pandavas in this situation? Because on and on, they just kept letting go. And none of their letting go reformed Duryodhana's unfair, unjust treatment. It just kept made Duryodhana keep doing more of the same and giving him more license to be unfair, to be immoral, to be unkind towards his brothers. Because remember, they're brothers. Now, Krishna then goes to the Hastinapur kingdom to negotiate on the behalf of the Pandavas. And he says to Duryodhana, hey, give them back their Indraprastha. You already have this huge kingdom, right? Why do you want Indraprastha? And it's theirs. They built it, not you. Give it back to them. Duryodhana said no. Okay, then Krishna, remember Krishna is the Lord of the universe, said, okay, then give them 5 districts. Districts is like a village. Give 5 districts for 5 Pandavas. No. Okay? Give them 1 village with 5 houses. No, says Duryodhana. Okay? Give them 1 house with 5 rooms. No. Duryodhana said, if they want 1 inch of land, they will have to fight to get it. And that moment was when Lord Krishna's negotiations failed. So notice how Lord Krishna negotiated. He made it easier and easier and easier. He didn't just brush off, hey, give me back Indraprastha. No, okay, you're, XYZ. He made it easier and easier and easier for Duryodhana to say yes. So he exhausted all of Duryodhana's options. And he said, no, 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 no. And finally, the war was declared because you cannot let someone that unreasonable keep getting away with it. And therefore, what happened next? Then the Pandavas, right, the 5 brothers, and the Kauravas is the side of the Duryodhana. So the Pandavas is 5 brothers and the Kauravas. The Kauravas is where Duryodhana is. It just means 100 brothers of Dhritarashtra. And they were both now trying to get bigger armies, right? Because they want their army to be bigger so they can win. So eventually, they want now Krishna's army, because Krishna also is a king and he has a huge army. So Yudhishthira sends Arjuna and on the behalf of Yudhishthira to Krishna. But Duryodhana also goes to Krishna. So both of them walk inside Krishna's palace, and Krishna's sleeping. And when Krishna opens his eyes, he first sees Arjuna, because Arjuna was at his feet, and Duryodhana was at his head. So it's like you're sleeping, you go, oh, okay, there's Arjuna. And Duryodhana says, I came in first, therefore I should say what I want. Krishna said, it's true you came in first. However, when I opened my eyes, I first saw Arjuna. Therefore, he gets to choose between what? He gets to choose between my army. That means he gets all of my horses, all of my elephants, all of the weapons of my army. Or option 2, he gets me. Now, if he chooses me, I won't fight. Now, Duryodhana was hoping that Arjuna will choose Krishna, because he knew that Krishna and Arjuna were kind of close, because they were kind of cousins. And what does Arjuna say? He says, I don't need your army. I'm already skilled. I'm one of the most skilled archers, one of the most skilled warriors in the land. I don't need more people. I need you. Now the question is, what does this you, Krishna, represent? Krishna represents a highly intelligent, discerning, intelligent, righteous, moral mind. So when you think of Krishna, is an embodiment of that intellect, sharp, discerning, clever, intelligent intellect that always knows what to do and when to do it, and how to do it most effectively. So this is the symbolism in the Mahabharata. And what does Arjuna say? He says, I choose you, Lord. I choose you, Krishna. And Duryodhana was ecstatic. He was like, oh, what an emotional fool. He doesn't know anything, So both of them got exactly what they wanted. Duryodhana got his army, but Arjuna also got his Lord Krishna. So what can we learn from this so far, by the way? We can learn that you always choose whatever you value. If you value something like a highly discerning mind, a highly informed mind, that is exactly where your attention goes. Look at Duryodhana. What did he value? He valued power. He valued being out there. And therefore, that is exactly what he got. So they both gotten exactly what they wanted. But now the question is, which one survives in the long term? The one that is always on the side of morality. And we will see that soon, because the whole war gets, Arjuna wins the ultimate war. So the next day, or it was not the next day, it was a few days later, there was a day of the battlefield. So now let me just give you 2 verses what happened on the battlefield, because I'm still answering the question, what is Bhagavad Gita, right? Okay. So in chapter 1, because Bhagavad Gita has 18 chapters, by the way, in chapter 1, verse 1, Dhritarashtra asks his consort called Sanjaya about the status on the battlefield. So Sanjaya could see, he was given this vision to see what was going on in the battlefield. And because Dhritarashtra couldn't see, so he had to ask his consort. And Dhritarashtra clearly recognized that this was not an ordinary war. It's not like World War II or something. It's not an ordinary war. It is a war fought in the name of universal morality, universal principles. Those principles which apply in the past, present, and future. It's a war between righteousness and unrighteousness. And he also knows that his sons, the Kauravas, are on the side of unrighteousness, immorality. So then he says to Sanjaya, what are my people doing? And what are the other people doing? So just hear the statement. What are my people doing? So in other words, Dhritarashtra is identified with his people, that is his family. Even though the Pandavas are also technically his sons, because, Dhritarashtra and Pandu are brothers. And he calls the other people. So this only reveals the status of how we divide the world into me versus them. What are my people doing and what are the other people doing? Now, even though Dhritarashtra knew that his sons are on the side of immorality, the question is, why didn't Dhritarashtra intervene, right? Why didn't he stop Duryodhana from just keep on getting his way? There's two answers to this. The first is because Dhritarashtra held resentment for his blindness. Because it's not easy to be blind and then you're supposed to be king, and he couldn't express that any other way. So how did he express that? He lived his wish to be a king through his son Duryodhana. That's the first reason. So how did he express that resentment? He found a medium, his son Duryodhana, through which he could live and therefore enjoy the status of being a king. And the second reason is because when it comes to family affairs, then we lose our sense, usually lose our sense between what is right and what is wrong, what is righteous and what is unrighteous, what is moral and what is immoral. Isn't this the case usually in families? When it comes to families, our whole righteous, unrighteous gets muddled up. And we start to protect the self-interest rather. But when it comes to seeing someone that is not within our family, then we have no issues discerning this is clearly incorrect. This is unjust, unfair, and that is fair. With our own families, the whole thing gets muddled up. So for these two reasons, Dhritarashtra couldn't make the right decision, and therefore he just kept on giving Duryodhana the license to keep being unfair. And then he justified it every single time. No, Duryodhana is my son. He needs to be happy. And I love my son, and I'm father. So this is how we go, right? We create this story in our minds and then we justify to feel happy about it. All the while we know that it is clearly unrighteous. Because Dhritarashtra just said, this is a war between righteousness and unrighteousness. And my sons are clearly on the side of unrighteousness. And yet he still had no power to do anything about it. Okay, I'm almost finished, right? The question, what is Bhagavad Gita? Now, because now he asked Sanjaya, right, his consort, what is happening? And Sanjaya replied, he says, Arjuna is now telling Krishna to take, because Krishna is now the consort, the chariot of Arjuna, so that it's like driving the horse, right, to the middle of the battlefield. So Arjuna is now telling Krishna, his charioteer, to take the horses to the middle of the battlefield so that Arjuna can see both sides. So this is a very interesting lesson because before we act, what did Arjuna do? Remember, Arjuna is a very wise person. What did Arjuna do? He first wants to see the big picture. What's happening on this side? What's happening on this side? But how do we usually act? We just go as though we already know it all. So Arjuna paused, let me first get the big picture so that I may be more informed. Therefore, I may increase the chances of winning this war. Now, when they came to the middle of the battlefield, immediately Arjuna breaks down. He says, he starts to cry. He not cry, but he gets emotional. He says, all I see, he's looking at the Kauravas right now, the side he's meant to fight. He says, all I see are my people. Now, contrast this to what Dhritarashtra said. He only called his own sons my people. But what is Arjuna calling also my people? The other side. So now we can see what does it mean to be a really integrated warrior. He first acknowledges, he sees the hearts, he sees men. He doesn't just see them versus us. He sees men no different than anywhere else. These are my people. I'm going to kill them all. So he first acknowledges them as a human being. And then Arjuna vividly describes to Krishna what he's experiencing. Because just imagine putting yourself in Arjuna's place right now. You've got your grandsire, the one that taught you, the one that's your grandfather, the one that's been there all along with you. He just happens to be on that side because he's Hastinapur's leadership. You've got your own teacher, Drona is on that side also, the one that taught Arjuna all his archery skills. All of the close associates are on that side. They just happen to be on that side. And then Arjuna says to Krishna, Krishna, my knees are growing weak. The weapon is falling out of my hand. My heart is beating fast. My mouth is starting to dry up. I'm unable to speak. So what does this mean? Arjuna is in touch with his emotions. Arjuna is one of the greatest warriors, clearly known by both sides. And he still is so integrated that he's able to show his emotions, his vulnerability, right in the middle of the battlefield when both sides are watching what's happening. But how do we go about it? We put on a face. No, nothing's affecting me. Right? I'm invincible. So what is the character of a truly integrated warrior? The one who is honest, upfront. He doesn't hide. She doesn't hide his or her emotions. She or he says it as it is, how it is. And that's what Arjuna did. And then what does Krishna say? He replies to Arjuna and says, give up this weakness and fight, Arjuna. Now, when I say fight, it's a metaphor. What does fight mean in the Bhagavad Gita? It means do what you have to do. Because you've got this entire army, right? You've got Duryodhana, who has been corrupting the society, who has been preaching immorality, who has been cheating and lying. If you don't do anything, he will just keep on doing more and more. And therefore, what would the society become? And you're the only one, Arjuna, who has the strength to defeat the entire army. Of course, you've got the other army behind him, but Arjuna was one of the best. If you don't do something, even if they're close relatives to you, think about the future consequences, the future generations, the corruption that will take place if you allow this kind of immorality to continue. Therefore, go and do what needs to be done. Go and fight. Now, Arjuna gives reasons, because when you say, I can't fight, you're always going to give reasons, right? Now, Arjuna gives 3 reasons why he cannot fight. And they're all good reasons. The first reason is, he says, if I win this war, and I know I can win this war, so Arjuna was so confident, in fact, he is one of the best. If I win this war, I will kill all these men before me. Now, where is this statement coming from? Compassion. So he sees them, as I said earlier, as men. They all have families. In fact, the second reason he says is, if I win, then the society will be what? Widows and orphans. All of these men will no longer be there. That means wives will now be single, widows, and their sons and daughters, orphans. Now, what kind of a kingdom will I rule then? A dysfunctional kingdom? And the third reason that Arjuna gives is he was concerned. What about future? Right? What about, because, it's a genuine concern to say, what about future heaven, hell? Will I go to some place for being punished by killing all these people? It's a valid question. It's not a matter of religion or non-religion. It's just a valid question. It's a valid concern. I'm about to kill so many people. Will I be punished? Will I pay the consequences at some future lifetime? Valid question. So these three arguments Arjuna gave for not willing to fight. And then Arjuna demonstrates once again what it means to be an integrated person. He doesn't give three reasons, says, for that reason, I'm not going to fight. He doesn't close down his mind. He says, Krishna, however, stating these reasons, I still want to ask you two questions. Number one, what should I do right now in this situation? In other words, I want to know situationally, what should I do? This is applicable to all of us. What should I do in this negotiation with this neighbor, with this colleague, with this person, with whoever we're dealing with? What should I do right now? And this is the Yoga Shastra part. Remember how Bhagavad Gita is two parts? Yoga Shastra, how to deal situationally. What should I do right now? In other words, are my three reasons justified? Am I missing something? Could there be more? So in other words, Arjuna still has an open mind, even if he stated these three convincing reasons. This is an integrated person. They don't shut down the world and say, no, I know everything. That's it. I don't want to hear what you have to say. Arjuna is still open. And the second question is, Krishna, what is that knowledge, knowing which, once known, I will gain the final fulfillment, permanent fulfillment, unwavering fulfillment? What is that knowledge, once known, I will gain fulfillment that has no end? Now, which question do you think Krishna answers? Question 1, Yoga Shastra, or question 2, Brahma Vidya? Question 2. Why? Okay, so one more verse and we'll see why. The next verse is chapter 2, verse 11. And this is where the actual teaching begins, where Krishna answers or starts answering these two questions. What should I do in this situation? Now remember, this doesn't just apply in the story Mahabharata. Mahabharata is a story that applies in all ages, past, present, and future. It is a beginningless story that shares the human drama, the human psychology that applies at all ages. What should I do in this situation? And what is that knowledge? Once known, I will gain that final, unwavering, undisturbed fulfillment. Now in chapter 2, verse 11, what does Krishna say to Arjuna's argument about those three reasons? He says, wise people don't grieve. Truly wise people, Arjuna, don't grieve for the living or the dead. Wise people don't grieve for the living or for those who are gone, passed away. And yet, Arjuna, you're grieving for the yet to be, for these men, and when they're gone. And you speak like a wise person. So even though you are relatively wise, there's much more to know. You're not totally wise, Arjuna, because wise men do not grieve for the living nor the dead. Now, what do you think this means? Do you think this means the wise person shuts themselves off to the world? They're just disconnected emotionally, not caring, just totally shut down, not willing to participate, don't want to know any of it? Is this what it means? I hope you said no. In other words, what does it mean to say the wise person does not grieve for the living nor the dead? It means that the wise person has a different understanding, a proper understanding about reality, about the entire reality, not just out there, but also this person. In fact, this person is not separate from out there because it's the same elements, right? Elements made of the tree, the same element made of the human being. So, different understanding about the entire universe. And second, the wise person knows the nature of this I. Who is this I when a person says I exist? What is the nature of my existence? And what is the connection between that existence and the existence of you? And the existence of a tree, existence of this entire universe? What is the connection between that? This is what a wise person understands. So, now, before going the entire Gita, right, let's summarize the question. What is the Bhagavad Gita? The Bhagavad Gita is It provides the solution to a beginningless problem. A problem that has applied 500 years ago, 2,000 years ago, as much as it applies in today's world, where we seemingly have all of the luxuries in the world. And what are those two beginningless problems? Number one, how do I properly manage situations in life effectively? And how do I know whether it is the most fair option, the most correct option? How do I know that? And second is, how do I discover final fulfillment? That is what the Bhagavad Gita is. Now, the second question you asked me was, why am I teaching it? I think it's obvious, because there is not one person that these two questions don't apply to. And for that reason, my whole life is committed to providing the teachings that this book of solutions is giving us, called the Bhagavad Gita. Okay, so that was the first question. What is the Bhagavad Gita and why are you teaching it? Okay.
Okay, wow. Really, 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 really interesting. And yeah, my mind started to go as a really nice trip.
Yeah,
And,
it's a big question, so I really wanted to cover from many angles.
Yeah, it was really, really nice. And you mentioned many in the all the story that you said. You mentioned different kind of laws, and I'm interested in specifically and if you can share about it, about the concept of the law of causality and mentalism. How,
Sure, okay.
Of course, you say something, but if you can tell us something else about that.
Sure. So the question is the principle of action-reaction, cause-effect. Let's talk a little bit about this. So, first of all, let me ask this question. What is a universal law? Because cause and effect is a universal law, by the way. It doesn't apply just today, it applies at all times. Today is a reflection of yesterday. Tomorrow is a reflection of today. Cause-effect. What is a universal law? It is that law, that principle, that order, which was there before you and I were here on this planet, which is here still working while we're alive for this short amount of time, and will continue to be there, operating, running this world in harmony when you and I, this body at least, is gone. In other words, what is a universal law? It is that law which is throughout all times, past, present, and future. Right now, it's working. Take gravity, for example. That's a simple one. Gravity is always working, and it's helping us remain here on this world. Good luck studying, floating up in the sky, right? So these universal laws are always there. Now, let me give a few examples. What about, for example, the principle of exposing the mind onto something that is impure, something that is dirty? Is that it? Once you finish the movie, a dirty movie, is that it? No. What happens? Your mind carries a trail afterwards. For how long? Well, it stays there. The mind's like a sponge. So let's talk practicality. So how do we apply this universal principle? Simple. Rule number one, or let's not call it a rule, let's call it a principle, a suggestion. Manage what your five senses are exposed to. What do I expose my eyes to? What do I expose my ears to? Yes, there's these other five senses, but mostly today it's the eyes and the ears. So treat the eyes and ears like a child. Do I want my eyes to go towards something that is dirty, that is impure? If yes, that's up to you. But do know this, the mind is influenced by whatever these eyes get, this instrument gets exposed to, and also what these ears hear. So if I keep on hearing something that is recursive in a sense of discouraging, then how is the mind going to, what kind of experience would the mind produce? A discouraging experience. That's called cause-effect. From the standpoint of the eyes, they become the cause. The mind The experience within the mind is the effect. That is just a very simple principle we call it in Sanskrit tapas. That means discipline, disciplining your five senses. The other principle that we can describe this cause and effect is suppose that we want to feel respected all the time. I need to be respected. I need to be acknowledged. I need to be seen by everyone. I need you to respond to me in a way that acknowledges my existence. I need you to validate me. Suppose we have this attitude. And in our behaviors, in our conversations, we're constantly kind of, we're looking for clues. Are they speaking to me in the way that I want them to speak to me? Are they acknowledging me? Am I being seen? Suppose I'm speaking to you now, and I'm constantly concerned how many people are, what's going over there, because, they're getting more respect. I'm not getting so much respect. They'll go like that person's got 5 people talking to them. I only got 1 person, you talking to me. So I'm not that respected. What kind of an effect would that produce? That's going to produce an effect of low self-esteem, constantly needing people to validate one's worth. So what does that cause? Dependence. So that behavior becomes the cause, and what becomes the effect? Dependence. Demanding to be respected, demanding to be acknowledged, demanding to be seen. Now let me give you some reasons or the fruitlessness of constantly demanding to be acknowledged. And why am I giving you this? Because the whole Bhagavad Gita is about reflecting upon your own behavior, asking or looking into your own behavior. For example, first, the qualifications that you have may not be recognized by the other. Suppose you are a chef and you're sitting on the airport and you start talking about how you're the chef of you're so popular on TV and you got so many people respecting you. And this person sitting next to you has no interest in food at all. Can they find themselves to respect you? Not really, because they just don't value food. They don't value anything about that field. But suppose I'm so attached to my niche, to my expertise, then how am I going to feel hurt? Why? Because I don't understand this. If you're a doctor, and if you're an archaeologist, right, and I am a geologist, they're different fields, or let's go with different, archaeologist and biologist, different fields. Then I can only respect another biologist. In fact, I'm not even going to find myself in archaeology field. The second is the person may not feel good, and therefore they're just not in the mood to give you the respect. But then how does the person interpret? They're not giving me respect. I feel hurt. And then a whole mood gets changed just on that one fact alone. The person probably woke up, barking dog or something. They probably, someone cut them on the road that contributed to them not feeling good. Or sometimes we convert a sense of respect into jealousy. This is a distortion within the mind. Yes, I respect you, all right, but I cannot stand you being so good. Therefore, I'm jealous. And then if you interpret that behavior and you take it personally, then again, you get hurt. Cause, effect. Another reason why it's pointless demanding respect or constantly asking for validation is to constantly demand for respect. We actually turn people off. And we need those people to actually succeed, to prosper in life. Because nobody likes to be forced to be seen as a mere tool to give respect. We want to be acknowledged as a human being. Again, cause, effect. I demand attention, I demand respect, I chase people away. Another reason, tell me one thing that you're an owner of in this world. Every skill that you and I know, everything we ever learned came from somewhere else, came from the hard work, the research of other scientists, other people's works. And we just simply take their work, take their research, we expose our eyes onto that, we learn that, and we become good. And then we say, no, I want respect. Look at me, I'm so good. Tell me one thing here that is yours. Even this body is not ours. We just simply take food. And because of this food grown by the farmers, held by the rain, also by the sun and the rain, right? Because of that alone, we eat the food and we sustain our body. Show me one thing here that is yours. The English language, the local language you speak, Spanish, English, whatever language it is, who taught you that? Your teachers. So now, who should get the respect? Should my teachers who taught me the English language? Should the weather, because it feeds the crops and the crops produce food for me to eat to survive? Is it the researchers that I will never contact, never see in my life, because of whom you are so good at what you do? Is it the parents who gave you birth? Is it the internet that provides the means of communication to reach another person? Who should we give respect to? So again, you can see the fruitlessness of this behavior to demand respect. Another reason, and the final reason, is we show respect in different ways. One culture may show respect by, or not even a culture, but a person gives you respect by words. But you want respect by what someone does. So your language of I'm respected is through actions, if someone does something for you, but their language is by acknowledgement, or it could be vice versa. So why am I sharing this? To show you how many variables are against the person who is engaged in this pattern of wanting to be acknowledged. And this wanting to be acknowledgement is what we call a cause. And this cause, left uninvestigated, non-investigated, has an effect. An effect of what? Constant disappointment. I'm not being seen, I'm not being respected. So let me give you what question are we on now? The question is, how does the Bhagavad Gita, or what does the Bhagavad Gita say about the law of cause and effect? So let me give you a few more examples. Let's divide this into two sections. The one is human experience. Which human? You. You're a human being, right? So from a standpoint of yesterday, as I said earlier, what is today? It is a reflection of whatever happened yesterday. How will tomorrow look like? It will look like, or it will represent whatever I've done today. So now if you take this concept and you apply it to your entire life, you ask, what is the result? What is my life? It's a result of what I do today. Because what I do today colors in tomorrow. And what I do tomorrow also modifies the day after. So this is, again, this cause-effect relation. In other words, we're being accountable for our actions. The second part that I want to emphasize in this cause-effect is more on a universal level. So let's talk about the whole universe. So when it comes to cause-effect universally, we will say that every substance, everything in this universe has a basis. Basis means there's something because of which it is. For example, the basis of a flower. So imagine a flower, please. The basis of a flower is what? A leaf. The basis of a leaf is a tree. The basis of a tree is a seed. The basis of a seed is the soil. So in that same way, the final reality, which I said earlier, that Upanishad, that which is the nearest of the nearest, the final reality is the basis of the entire universe. And this is what the Upanishads talks about, or the Bhagavad Gita talks about. Because I said earlier, there's no contradiction between the Bhagavad Gita and the Upanishads. The Bhagavad Gita is just a story about what the Upanishad is saying. Or let's look at, for example, a leaf. Okay, and I said leaf depends on the wood. But what does the wood depend on? It depends on components. For example, lignin and cellulose. Specifically 25, because I've said this before, so I know the numbers. 25% lignin and 45% cellulose, plus minus. Now, if you look at, for example, cellulose, what does cellulose consist of? It consists of 6 carbon atoms, 10 hydrogen atoms, and 5 oxygen atoms. Now, let's just take a carbon atom. What does an atom depend on? Electron around an atomic nuclei. What does an atomic nuclei depend on? A proton and a proton and what's the other one? A neutron. What does a proton depend on? Quark up, quark down, a specific number. What does the quark depend on? Now you can use a string theory. Or if you want to bring in the quantum field theory, because I know they will have some difference between quantum field theory and atom model, it doesn't matter. Everything is a wave. What does the wave depend on? 0 point energy. What is 0 point energy? Virtual particles. What about virtual particles? Matter, antimatter. And then you keep on going smaller and smaller. You cannot find one ending. Now the question is, what is the final ending which has no basis underneath? Remember when I said earlier, the question, what is that nearest which has no nearer? And the answer was myself. So now the question is, when you apply that to the entire universe, what is the basis of the entire universe which has no smaller constituent? This is where the Upanishads or the Bhagavad Gita comes. Because our quantum field theory model or our atomic model can only take us so far. But even scientists themselves will say, we do not know what else is there. We do not know the final substance of the universe. The answer to that is you will never find the final substance of the universe because it cannot be perceived through your instrumentation. Not through the eyes, not through inference, not through instrumentation. Therefore, you need another means of knowledge. And that means of knowledge is contained within the Upanishads. So the Upanishads is not, the Bhagavad Gita is not only for providing an answer how to live in this world, but also what is the nature of this entire universe. What is the first of the first, which has nothing before it? How did this universe start? What was there before the Big Bang, if you want to use the Big Bang model? Into what the time and space itself resolve into? All of these questions are answered beautifully and concisely in the Bhagavad Gita. So this was in the sense of the question, what does the Bhagavad Gita say about the law and cause and effect? And what have I answered? I brought this question in the sense of human being level, that means us personal relatable level, but also just a little bit about the whole universal level, just to give you a preview of both.
And I was thinking, I was interested also in what you can share about how, talking about this entire universe and about our consciousness, how people can get benefits in their lives, how they can use it, or how they can moving on with that.
Sure. So the question is, okay, now we brought a new word, consciousness. So because I have to now define consciousness, and that is another conversation. So let me just use the second part of the question, that is, how can we use this for the sake of practicality? What are some components within the Bhagavad Gita which we can use to help us to purify our minds so that the larger reality of life can be firmly and clearly understood? So without bringing the word consciousness, let's just talk ordinary practical level. The first thing is, as I said earlier, it's very important to consciously and deliberately be the coordinator. Where do your five senses be exposed to every day? Because today we have so many things asking for our attention. And if we do not deliberately control or modify how much and how long our senses can be exposed to certain things, then what's the mind constantly going to think about? It's going to think about whatever the mind is, whatever the senses are exposed to. The news, right? Other people's opinions, this, that. So the mind never really gets a chance to get in touch with the subtler realities. So the Bhagavad Gita talks about two realities. One of them is for the sake of dealing with this world, this transactional, we call it the Vyavaharika world, this empirical transactional world. I see tree, you see tree. Let's talk trees. But there's another reality. the final substance, the content of everything in this universe. And that substance is the subtlest of the subtlest. That substance, yes, there's another name for it called consciousness. It's not really a substance because substance implies it's a form, but consciousness is formless. So that consciousness, the final reality of all, the ultimate base behind everything, in order for the mind to detect that, to sense that, to see, even the word sense is kind of, not correct, but for mind to discern that, for the intellect to discern that, the intellect needs to be highly, highly subtle. Now, the question is, how do you create a subtle intellect? As I said earlier, and I'll keep saying it again and again, we need to be careful what we expose this mind to, because we do not give it chance to calm itself down. Constantly thinking about what I should do, what I shouldn't do, where I should go, what I should plan tomorrow, what I should have done. Constantly just involved with, and there's nothing wrong with this, by the way, because here's the important part. If I don't address my inner psychology, my inner emotions, then even if I'm trying to sit down and meditate, what's the first thing that's going to come up in meditation? The inner stories. Isn't this your experience? When we sit down, and one moment when I want peace, that is the one moment when all of the unaddressed stuff that I've been putting underneath the carpet, that it's when it finally flourishes. In other words, showing you what? That this mind, which is meant to discern the subtlest of the subtlest realities, consciousness, is still contemplating on what in the background? On my stories. Why is it doing that? Because I haven't taken the deliberate, conscious time to look into this relative person called Andre, this relative person called your name. Therefore, there is no question, and this is where the Gita, perhaps my final message also, is very clear. There is no question of putting anything under the carpet or avoiding it, because you can't. Where is it going to go? Even science says nothing in this universe can get destroyed. So all of my stories, my narratives about the world, about you, about him, about her, about what I've done, what I haven't done, all of that is there, constantly seeking my attention. Look into me, look into me. Until you look into me, you will not be able to discern the subtler realities. So this is the beauty of the Bhagavad Gita. It doesn't skip the human being. It doesn't avoid the psychology, because psychology is 99% of it. If the psychology is clear, then we just need to provide you this final teaching, which is what the Bhagavad Gita is, the Upanishads, and then the discernment is very fast. And this is the difference between those who come to the Gita classes for years, still asking, oh, what is this final reality? What is consciousness? I cannot quantify it. I can't think consciousness. And those who come there maybe a few days, few months, and then finally get it. And that is what we call the final fulfillment, the final contentment, because that base of the entire universe is you. It's a big statement, I understand. And it takes a long time to explain. Not really, but it takes over and over. Why does it take a long time, by the way? Because our narratives from the past keep on interrupting. So I tell you something, and then what happens tomorrow? Your old notions erase it. So this is where repetition is needed, over and over and over again. It is not a one-off. Nothing is a one-off for a human being. We need constant reminders, constant teaching from different angles, because our narratives are so strong from childhood, from the past. They just keep on, nope, this is how it is. And we kind of erase it, like, okay, I'm clear now. Tomorrow, nope, this is how it is. And then, I'm dull again. So we go through this black or white, right? This constant lights on, lights off. Now I got it, now I don't. Now I got it, now I don't. Why? Why does this happen? Because the mind still needs more work on itself. So the Bhagavad Gita integrates both Western psychology, Indian philosophy, but also the final reality that is expounded clearly and beautifully in the Upanishads.
Clear, Andre. Yeah, thank you. So we are arriving in the end of this interview or talk, or wherever this share. And I would like to ask you if you want to say something for ending, whatever you want to say. You can.
Whew. I can only share what I personally find most beneficial for me, and that is never stop being educated. Have something around you, to some material that is worthy of pursuit, something that interests you, but also some material that causes your mind to think expansively, to think wider. Otherwise, the moment we stop, as I said, our narratives come back. And what does a narrative do? It narrows our vision into one single possibility. And that possibility becomes our whole world. And in that little small scale, what do? We miss out on everything else. And that missing out is what causes us suffering, causes us pain. Therefore, consistently, never-endingly, keep getting educated till the last breath. This is not a one-off, because most of us, we read one book, one course, and we say, that's it, I'm now good to go. But in real life, you and I both know it is not like that. We need constant education. Therefore, educate yourself. And I bless all of us to have that courage and willpower to have something that is interesting and keeps our mind sharp, keeps our mind active, keeps our mind engaged, so that we can contribute our talents and skills to the world. So what is the final mark of maturity for a human being? When a human being stops being a consumer and it starts being a giver. And therefore, the giver and the consumer are now in balance. I'm not just consuming material, but I'm also giving material to the world. That is a mark of maturity for a human being.
Thank you very much, Andre. That's what we do also in Cosmosociología, and also and then this is also sharing for people who is watching here, and sharing these things and develop, and So
Absolutely.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Andre, for your talk and your sharing.
I'm glad this will reach whoever watches it, and I do hope that it inspires some of us to pursue the Bhagavad Gita, because it's an amazing text. And if not, then I wish all the best to everyone for your success and prosperity.
Okay, it was so inspiring. So thanks for sharing.